Welcome to the Tech League podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Tech League podcast with me, Toby Sears, and my regular co-host, Krisztian Fisher.
Hello.
Hello, nice. Little bit of housekeeping as always. We have an email that you can, if you want to get in touch with us, it's techleaguepodcast@gmail.com. So send any questions or feedback you have to that email address and we'll get back to you. Or if it's a good story or something, we might read it on a podcast in the future. You can find us on Spotify, Tech League, YouTube, Tech League Podcast, Apple Podcast, Tech League, and whatever your favorite podcasting is. Hopefully it's there. If it's not there, let us know on the email and we'll try and get ourselves listed. Please follow us on Spotify or subscribe to us on YouTube. That would be massively appreciated. Okay, let's get on to the topic of the day. So we're going to be talking today, having more of a discussion than a deep dive about technical communication. And the reason we picked this topic is because it's very, very important. It's one of the most important things, I think, in tech, because tech encompasses a lot of engineering, but it also encompasses all the business and salespeople and everything around that. And having a bridge between those two is super important. There's a lot of other places where technical communication is also super important. We'll get into those. But it's something I feel that gets overlooked a lot. Being so crucial to the industry, it's something that I think gets overlooked a lot. But we're probably going to dive into what it is, why it is, how it is, and then how we think to do it properly, how to do it well. We're not experts in this field. We just know good examples of what is good and what is bad. And we've experienced both. So I thought that would be an interesting topic for this week. So we should dive straight into it with Krisztian. What would you say technical communication is? Would you define it?
Well, it's a quite broad topic.
Yes,
I can talk about it from an engineer's perspective. I think there are like different audiences that you have to communicate technical details with, and they all require different type of communication. I think that's where the challenge is, to switch between these different contexts. So for instance, like you have the business stakeholder, you can't use technical terms with business stakeholders, but let's enumerate them. So you definitely have a business stakeholder who could be a product person, who could be your manager, who could be the board of the company, or could be the C-level where they want an executive summary. These are what I would consider like business people. Then you could also have a discussion with your fellow engineers, where you have to use completely different terminology. You have to use technical terms that they also understand. But then there are multiple forms for all of these audiences. And then there's also potential customers when you have to talk to them. As an engineer, it's a rare case. But for instance, if you're doing pre-sales, that also could be a totally different audience that you have to talk to. And I think each of these audiences require different type of communication and different level, as in technical details level, and also a different way of communicating. Because in certain cases you're representing the company, otherwise you're representing your team, sometimes you're representing the management's opinion or the management's direction or the strategy or something towards your engineer. So all of these require different types of communication. We can dive into each of these. What do you think?
I'm thinking, as an overview, the concept of technical communication is trying to communicate complex technical issues or subjects to non-technical people. That's what I would say is the broadest sense. There's other things, obviously, like internally talking within engineering teams how to communicate effectively in technical ways. But I think for me, probably the most important part is having that bridge between the technical and non-technical parts of an organization or customers, like you said. And I think you're exactly right. The first thing you need to do is identify the audience. And this is something you learn over time and you kind of do naturally. But at the start, it was very tricky. It's like there's a difference between talking to a somewhat technical product manager who understands a bit of what's going on and my mother-in-law. Those are completely different audiences, right?
Yes.
One doesn't even know how to turn the TV to a different channel. The other one can sometimes, maybe in Lovable, do some technical stuff. Do you know what I mean? So that's the first, probably the first. The first thing you need to think about is identifying the target audience and making sure that you tailor the messaging to that target audience. Now, it's pretty tricky, and it will take some practice to get it right, and you won't always get it right. You'll have to, it's like like gauge it in with some people. You start at one point and you notice that they're not getting the concepts, and you have to dumb it down a little bit, or you notice they're getting bored, and then you can make it a bit more complicated.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking something that, and I've been thinking about this all week since we decided we were going to talk about it. Something I think is quite important is like a form of empathy, right? Trying to put yourself in their shoes, trying to understand where their mindset is. And it's something that I try to guide my teams with a lot, is the concept of the curse of the expert. And for those who don't know, the curse of the expert is if you explain something to someone expecting them to have a certain level of knowledge because you do, but the reality is they have hardly any knowledge in that, could have hardly any knowledge in that area. I used the example of Kubernetes before, where you could be talking to even another developer, and they've never used Kubernetes, and you're talking about things like pods and services and ingresses and stuff. Like, they're normal, and to you they are, because you've put the work in to gain the knowledge. You're an expert in that case. And the curse of the expert is that you unintentionally expect other people to understand the same level of stuff that you do. And you have to be aware of that when you're communicating technically, or communicating anything that has any kind of like barrier to entry.
What would be an example?
What would be an example? Kubernetes is an example.
No, could you show an example where how you would say something about Kubernetes to a person who understands what it is and someone who doesn't, and it's exactly like the same message? It's
very tricky, right? That guy was talking to a truck driver the other day, and I was trying to explain to him. He asked me what I did in IT, and I tried to explain to him. And like, we should get into this as well. It's like using analogies and like things that people, you think that the person might understand to explain a point. Let's use Kubernetes, okay? Let's say, I don't know, you want to schedule more pods. So the load's too high, so you want to schedule a bunch more pods, or you have an auto scheduler that works off of the CPU or memory and schedules pods up. Adds more pods based on load. You just say to someone who knows, we need to add a scheduler that, will schedule more pods if there's a spike in CPU, or we should monitor the CPU usage and then schedule more pods appropriately. With a non-technical person, you say, okay, we have one mini computer running and it's doing everything we want, but it only has a certain amount of compute power. And if it gets close to the limit of that compute power, we can magically spin up another computer that does the same thing and then spread the load across the both. And then we can do that based on the amount of people that are coming to our site or something. Mm-hmm. That's a very dumbed down version though, right? That's probably something. You would dumb it more.
Yeah, I would even say, as we have more work to do in the business, because we have more customers, we need more workers. This will create more workers for us, for instance.
That would work with that. If you're talking to business people, you can just say we need more workers because we have more work to do, but they're computer workers. Yeah.
And the costs will go up.
Yeah, but the profits hopefully will go up more.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the use of an analogy though, right? And again, the empathy of trying to understand or frame your concept in a way that the target audience will understand.
I remember when I was a relatively junior engineer and I had to talk technical terms with business stakeholders or customers in a small company. I did make this mistake. I was talking a lot of tech things, as you do as a junior, because that's what you understand. And the faces that start back at me, it's like, what are you even talking about? I understood nothing. This can go both ways. Like sometimes they think that, oh, you're such a smart guy, but more often than not, they just get confused and they don't know if you're
zone out.
You're just talking rubbish to them or you're actually an expert. So I found it very early in my career that forcing yourself not to use technical terms at all when you're talking to the stakeholders actually is beneficial.
That's a good idea.
Because they don't need to waste brain cycles on what Kubernetes is. And that's why I get super scared when management starts talking about, are we using Kubernetes? Like, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Because it's just one tool out of a huge toolbox. So I think you can formulate everything without weaving in these, especially acronyms, technical acronyms. Oh, the DNS is down. Like, okay, do I need to know that? Like, no, like we have to force ourselves to formulate the sentences in a way that is understandable by a layperson. And I think it's beneficial for us as well because it forces you to think about it in more abstract terms, and it can put a lot of technical details into context, because you realize like it's not even worth mentioning because it's completely irrelevant for the topic, and that helps you communicate in a much cleaner way towards the non-technical audiences. But I like to go back a little bit, because you said like when you talk about technical, or you think about technical communication, you think about the translation between the business and the technical people. But I do think that within the technical realm or domain, it's also very important. And as we discussed earlier in the earlier episodes, the scope of your work increases as you're getting more senior. So a junior will work within the confines of a team, probably a few services and whatnot, and they will know those terms. Like if you would put a junior in front of, let's say, the biggest customer of the company, they would struggle to communicate well. So I think at the junior level, you have to start communicating first with your fellow engineers. And there are many ways to do that. Like first of all, like of course, like on meetings, on stand-ups, on whatnot, where you can actually use technical terms because you're amongst your peers. But even then, it's very important to use exact terms and be precise with the wording. Clear communication. And this doesn't just extend to the verbal side of the communication, I think. This is where it's important to have a README in your repo, so I understand what the service is for instance. I see so many repos in my professional career that has zero explanation what the service is, what it does, what's the context.
I was dealing with one today. Exactly that.
You see, and it's so frustrating. And this is the first level of communication, or this would be an example of lack of communication at the lowest level. And I think this is disrespectful, first of all, and also very, very damaging to the company. Because in the end, in a medium-sized company, you will have hundreds of repos. And sometimes you're just looking around for finding information, and you don't want to disturb the team. You just want to look at the fact on the ground, the code. And then you go into a repo and it's inappropriately named. You don't know, the name doesn't even get close to what it's doing, like what the service is actually doing. There's no README, there's no documentation. So I think technical communication involves this as well. Write good comments in the code. Don't go overboard with that, but like some help, pointers, so the audience can actually find what they're looking for. Have a nice, README file or architecture diagram of what it does. List the dependencies and these type of. So I think technical communication starts at that level early in your career, and then as you grow, you will add more and more layers to that. Just like you add to the technical knowledge, you add to the communicational style. Because then suddenly, as a senior engineer, you will have to communicate the idea of what we want to create to the juniors as well, or to your peers. Like this is like set the direction. Hey, we're going to create a service that is working asynchronously, and that should help the others understand. So I think we again have this layering of communication styles and abstraction levels as you grow in your career. You're biased a little bit because you're senior, so your job is typically translating from the business layer to the business world to the technical world, and that's what you're doing. But I think there are layers below that or before that in time in your career where you have to do good communication as well, not just verbally, but in a written form as well. Even the code can actually be a way of communicating to others what you want, like the naming of the methods, the naming of the classes. So I think that also involves is included in technical communication, at least in my worldview.
So there's a bunch of different things that we're discussing here. It's a very broad topic. So when you're a junior, it's important to learn the technical ways of communicating within a team, clearly, how to leave breadcrumbs and like a good documentation trail so that your work is understandable by others, which can be very tricky, especially if you're pressed. And I found recently a very useful thing for that is to use something like Cursor to just write all the documentation for me. Have an agents MD, and I say, this is the tagging strategy, this is how I want it documented. And then before I do any Git pushes, I say, can you update the README with any changes? And it just does it for me.
It's certainly a helpful tool.
Yeah, I think it's excellent for that.
what you can't do with automated tooling is to express the intent.
No.
Intent of
Sure.
the code, intent of the service, intent of the business function that you're trying to implement. Because that's what I found most frustrating long term is when we lose the organizational knowledge about, let's say, a service, and then we're trying to reverse engineer what was it, and then we see code like that says like if this then that, and we don't know if that was just a side effect or if that was the intention or of the business, or is this a bug, and that therefore if you want to touch it, you don't know if it's if you should fix that bug, because maybe it's not a bug, maybe it's a feature. So that's why I think it's important to communicate what the intention was. And you can't reverse engineer that from the code. So you always have to add that part to even if you're using automated tooling. And I do agree, like Cursor does a great job on creating architecture diagrams and or class diagrams and showing how it is, but the why it is that way is what we always have to provide, and that's very important to communicate.
So we've pivoted slightly into effective technical communication within teams and writing documentation. So there was a few things you've noted there. There's the intent for the software, the overall, like there's things that Cursor can do, like what it does, the deployment methodologies, like all the layout of the repo and stuff. There's also, you need like, it'd be good to have design documents, API documentation, architecture diagrams, and also include things like assumptions made when writing the software.
Exactly. That's one of the important documents, I would say. When you make architecture decisions, in many companies, these are called architecture design decision records, that you can go back and understand what the context was. Oh, we had so many customers and we expected the traffic to be this high. We needed to have this response times. Therefore, we chose this technology. At a higher level, we would need to replace it. Super important information for the next guy who's coming and looking at it when the company has grown 10 times. And then, why did you guys do this? This makes no sense. And then, oh yeah, because that was the context then. So it's safe to replace it, and it was intended to be replaced. So there's no pushback.
It has like temp in the name, and it's been there for 10 years.
Yeah, that's a super important topic you touched on, the naming. We all know naming is hard in this industry, but we can give advice on how to name things. Like for instance, or how not to name things. I usually advise not to have mythical creatures as names,
or planets, or starships, or
any fictional characters from your favorite movie. They sound fun, and they're fun as you're small, but when somebody comes back 5 years later and they read the name of your project and it says nothing to them, then we always have to do a mental jump, like, okay, what does that mean? And we have to keep this mapping in our head. We have worked in companies where the teams were called koalas and pandas and God knows what. And then you always have to ask, like, okay, what do they actually do? Oh, they're doing the billing, or they're doing the transaction process. Okay, now I understand.
I was at a place recently, and it was, the only rule was the team had to be called team and then a 4-letter word. And you had no idea what any of them did.
Yeah.
Like team goat and team boat.
It's a good example of how not to do it.
Yeah.
It's much easier to, if I say like, I'm going to talk to the billing team.
Mm-hmm.
I know what they do, right? Immediately. So I would advise naming things on what they do, not what they are. For instance,
it does sound super boring, but every place that I've been, I've tried to do the same. It's like, oh, this is the billing management service, or this is the deployment scaling service. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yes, but that's
you know exactly what it does.
Yeah, because then when you have 300, then you don't have to have a massive mapping table of like what's what. The name explains.
It don't go, it's the DSP, or DSS, the deployment scaling service. It's not the DSS. Don't ever acronize it. It's the deployment scaling service. Don't give me DSS rubbish, right? Because it is, again, it's trying to avoid that mental mapping and the mental overhead required to have the communication. And it might sound fun to shorten these things or make cool things. It is fun. But what you're doing is you're having fun, but you're introducing mental load to other people that isn't needed.
Exactly. You're playing with someone else's time there. And also like in similar fashion, You don't need to include the technology in the name,
No,
or
that's
that
really
it's
bad.
temporary, or that
Yeah.
this is new, or
Yeah.
because the
Or
worst name you
old,
can have is
old.
like old, and new.
We had, what was it, temp NAT gateways for like 5 years.
Yeah.
Temp new NAT gateway or something.
Everything is temporary, even life, So it's
Yeah, exactly. So that's a good point.
yeah. So name things what they are, not what they do, not what they are.
Mhm.
Like, you don't call something the Java service or Java, or don't include the technology name. Like, this is a Kubernetes service, or what I mean is, like, if you have a service that is not related to the infrastructure, but it happens to run on Kubernetes, then don't use the domain name that includes Kubernetes, or don't use, like, because it's irrelevant for the consumer of that service.
Yep.
You should name the service what it is, not or what it does, rather.
If you're that's when you're dealing with like stuff running on stuff. Because my first thought is the moment I'm working on EKS, and I have a repository called company name EKS, and that's what manages everything. That's fine because I'm working with that technology. What wouldn't be fine is if I wrote a program to do something and then called it Toby's service EKS. It should be Toby's service. And then can be deployed on anything.
Exactly, because then when you move technologies, you don't have to rename it. Let's say you move to ECS, then you have the Toby service ECS, and it's the same. Like, nobody cares, and you should just have a domain that points to tobyservice.yourcompany.com, and then you just change the domain. But we're going into the very technical details, but it shows the importance of clear communication, and I think this is the this is the first level of technical communication.
Like we have a lot of other things with the different levels. So like as a junior, name things properly. Don't put technology names in. Don't call it Java Service 5. Say what it does, and then that's it. And then make sure you have a proper README. And I would even say, like, you write an overview, which is for anyone, and then you have more technical stuff underneath, and you have all the stuff you need. We made this because this was the state of the system and we wanted to do this kind of thing. These are the links to the design documentation and architecture diagrams. The API docs are hosted here. No analogy, no acronyms, and super clear.
You can use acronyms, but when you introduce an acronym, write it out first. And then introduce the acronym. It's okay to use acronyms if you have to, because you have to repeat it several times in your document or in your README or whatever, but please introduce it first so I understand what you're talking about, because obviously there are overlaps between acronyms as well.
Do you know what the best worst acronym I have ever heard was? I worked at a company and they had a management system for something, I can't remember, but they called it the BDMS. Everyone got it wrong.
Excellent name.
Everyone got it wrong. BDSM. Everyone said it. BDSM.
Yeah, that's a good reason not to do that. But you touched on something like the API documentation, for instance. That's also a super important way of communicating your technical system. So it's super important for your audience, which would be the API consumer. So that's when we talk peer-to-peer, like developer to developer. It's one of the most neglected areas of development, I would say, documentation. And I would argue it's
100%
one of the most important ones, actually. Because if you're looking at an API specification and it just says like, oh, let's say there's a get customer endpoint and it says it gets the customer, that's not very helpful. So I think one way to handle this is you have to provide context for every audience or in every format. Like if you're writing a document or a README, then you should write first like an introduction. What is this document about?
I do
this
overview
document
every time.
Yeah, exactly. Overview or preface or something like that. Yeah, or something where you explain why you're writing the document, who is it written for, what is the context that you need to know. When people are reading your documents, they will bring all their context with them. If I'm in the billing team and I start reading a service documentation, I'm going to look for the billing related things from it. So we will have a different understanding of the same things if you're not framing the communication. In a verbal setting, in a meeting, it's important to say in the beginning of the meeting, we are here to like discuss these topics and these are the outcomes that we're expecting from the meeting, right? It's the same thing.
We'll get into meeting stuff in a bit.
Okay, we can do it. But what I'm saying is like it's these analogies or these concepts exist on every level. The README, an API doc, because most companies have multiple APIs, and then you have to set the context. This is the billing API that serves only billing. Like if you're looking for the order management API, go here. These type of things. So it helps orientate the audiences. We're still talking about, in this context, the engineer to engineer technical
I would
communication.
say when you're picking, maybe even when you're picking a technology that's making an API, most of these technologies include some sort of API documentation, like Open API or something like that. I know, like Fast API I've been working with recently, that includes really nice auto-generated API documentation. And then you make sure that you do the doc strings and stuff so that it will render super nice. And you make it a habit from day one, and you'll be set for life if you do that. People will super love working with you.
Exactly. So people's perception of you is through how you communicate with them. And if you're communicating poorly, people will think poorly of you. That's how it is.
Complete side note, but like it blows my mind that it's such an inefficient spoken word and written word is such an inefficient method of communicating concepts. If you think about it, because if I said to you, I'm imagining in my head a bowl of yellow flowers, there's no way, no matter how much description I went into, that you would be able to see that same bowl of flowers in your head. It's a very lossy method of communicating. Right?
It's a low bandwidth communication.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like mind-to-mind image sharing would be the best.
Yeah, but we don't, until we have that, like we have to be concise with the communication. We have to We have to learn how to do it. This is not something you're born with. You have to practice it and you have to learn it. But luckily we have enough help nowadays if you want to get into it. I'm not a great public speaker either, but I know how to communicate the technical ideas or technical terms. And it seems to be appreciated by the management or the customers when I talk to them.
I think so. I think in my career, I've definitely had it where I don't think I'm the best engineer. Like I didn't finish university or anything, but my ability to communicate and be friendly and social, we've talked about this before, like socialness and being friendly, and also the ability to abstract technical communication, technical concepts into a way that non-technical people can understand has helped me a lot. And I was thinking the other day, what has helped me do that? And I think it's probably background as well, because I've worked in non-technical fields. I was a ski and snowboard instructor for many years. And there I learned how to teach people. And a lot of those concepts have helped me a lot when it comes to technical work. Especially like public speaking, you're standing up in front of people. There's multiple ways people learn. You have to explain it in different ways for different people. Every time you say it messes with people's brains, because if you do it too much, they'll start noticing all the time and removing filler words and all this kind of stuff and speaking clearly and trying not to slur your words. And I still do that. But all of this stuff has helped massively with my technical career, is what I'm trying to get at.
You touched on something that's super interesting for me, because since we started recording these sessions, I'm forced to listen back to what I'm saying. I noticed the patterns that I'm applying all the time, and it helps me to learn, and it helps me to try to fix those bad habits that I have.
It's practice, and it does seep back in over time. I've noticed myself now. We're on episode 6. Instead of going I will stop and think about it. That's a habit I used to have perfectly, hands down, while I was teaching. But now, and then over years, it seeped back in, and then I worked at other places where I had to give lots of lectures, and I got rid of it, and now it came back in, and now it's going away again because I hear myself. Yeah. But it's an active skill you have to practice. We're talking more public speaking now, but it also helps communicating.
It is like I have friends who had massive problems with speaking even in front of the class, for instance, and like that's like 20 people. And in a workplace setting, you will 100% need to speak in front of more than that amount of people. So you have to get over these mental blocks, I would say, and then just start doing it. And you have to start doing it early with smaller audiences, with friendly audiences, and then you can go up into like complete strangers and hundreds of them. But I wanted to like give this a like something, because we're recording the meetings in most companies nowadays, it's worth sometimes going back and listening to yourself, how you're speaking, how you could have done it better. Maybe I shouldn't have gone into this technical detail, although I understand what I said and probably most people understood, but it was not the right level. Or what I like to do is as well be using Google. So I ask Gemini, what was the sentiment in the room? It's super interesting. What was the sentiment from customers? And they say like, it would say something like, oh, you weren't clear with these topics. And so it's probably a mixed reception. That's very interesting feedback. And you can interrogate yourself as well, because it will just tell you how it is. I said, like, what do you think about the presenter? And then it says like, oh, it was unclear, or this topic was discussed but couldn't answer fully, the full extent. So it was a bit wishy-washy. It will tell you that. So it's
I don't know if I want to hear that, because I tend to waffle.
Yeah, but it's but at least you can do it in a private setting, right? Like you don't have to ask someone else to be awkward towards you. A mature colleague will tell you, especially your manager will most likely tell you, hey, you could have done this better this way or that way. I didn't like how you got into something that wasn't reflecting well on us. Or you can use obviously your manager for this purpose, but you have tools as well to do this. And you could even like record test sessions where you try to explain something that, like, let's say you have an all hands meeting where you have to present something, practice it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you can listen back to it and say like, I shouldn't say this, or, oh, this sounded very awkward. And then you can improve this way. It's a hard thing to do, especially like I'm not native English speaking, for instance. I make a lot of mistakes. My language doesn't even have gender, so all this gender stuff for me is really hard. I can call people her or him, but misgender.
I just ignore it when you do it, but
not on purpose. And also like communication style. Maybe this is not strictly part of technical communication, but the way you present it. So, for instance, I have issues with the eye contact. I can't think and look at people's eyes. So you will see me even in this podcast. If you're looking at the video, I might look on the side while I'm thinking.
That's exactly what I do. It's because it allows my brain to not think about what the person is thinking and think about what own. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's what happens.
Yeah. I don't know what this is. Maybe I'm on the spectrum, or we're both on the spectrum. Probably. If you know, let us know in the comment what we are. But it is what it is, and I'm trying to work on it, but it's not easy for me because I have a physical limitation. I
think it's fine to look away, to think, and then look back.
Many people are thrown off by that.
Really? Because I do it.
I had situations when I was talking one-on-one with someone, explaining or not explaining, but like talking about difficult topics where I have to think, and I keep looking away from the faces, so my brain is offloading the work of the face processing. I think, I don't know.
That's what I think.
But yeah, and then they look like, where are you looking? So it can be very disturbing for others. This is maybe not that relevant for your career or for technical communication, but this is part of the presentation or presenting yourself.
But if you're talking to a lot of people in a room, it's easier. I find it a lot easier when I'm on Teams or Meet or whatever. I've had it lots of times where I've given presentations on topics and it's hundreds of people, but you don't see them because you're behind the camera. And then I go to the office and I see this massive screen. And I'm like, my face was on there giving like the talk, right? Do you know what I mean? I find it a lot easier to do that. But if you do have to do it in a room, you can look above everyone. You don't have to look at anyone because people will think you're looking at someone else. So you don't have to look at anyone when you're doing a talk in front of lots of people.
When you're talking one-on-one.
When you're talking one-on-one, yes.
Yeah. But maybe we're digressing.
We are completely. But okay. So we covered very briefly technical communication. Make sure it's clear. Make sure the low-level technical communication. And then something you raised a little bit is at some point you're going to get put into meetings. And communicating in meetings is different. Then you have to start bearing in mind the people that are in the room, right? Because not everyone is going to necessarily be technical. Because you can kind of assume most of the time, if someone's reading your README in a GitHub repo, they're going to be somewhat technical because they can get there. If you're in a room, you have to look at who's in the room and then decide on how to speak. something I have noticed, there's always going to be quiet people and there's always going to be vocal people. I am not, as a manager, I'm not a fan of forcing the quiet people to say stuff, because I've been at places where they're like, you're too quiet, you need to speak up for more. I'm like, why? Like, if he doesn't have anything to say, he doesn't have to say anything. Meeting communication is a whole topic in itself, right? I like, personally, the way I like it is the way that company that we both worked at did it, where you have the pre-meeting notes and everyone reads through it, and then they leave comments, and then you go through the comments. That's super nice.
Yes, that's also a very good communication technique. If you want to discuss a topic, first of all, it's to write a pre-read for the meeting. But this is true for writing an RFC, or just writing, like you have a problem you need to solve and write it down and iterate over it a little bit. So, because when you reread it, you will understand, you will see if it's understandable by others. I agree, that's a very good technique. But on the meetings, I do like to ask everyone's opinion. But that's because the work culture here in the Nordics is like that, to have consensus. So if somebody is not speaking, I usually ask them what their opinion is, even if they're the most junior. And the reason is not really because we're going to change the whole plans because the junior said something, but I want to hear their opinion. Did they understand what the others were talking about? And also they might have a really good idea actually, right? And also it starts to include them in the process, so they will learn how to communicate the ideas. Most of the time, if you ask a junior, they will just say a lot of technical stuff that the manager doesn't understand, or maybe if they understand what they are saying, what's the conclusion?
Well, I don't know if it's a bad habit or something, but if I have a junior that does that, I will then translate it into terms that
exactly, and that's what I'm getting at. Like, so if you have different levels in the room and you're the more senior person, listen to everyone and then try to convey the important part, the important message of all of that techno bubble to management, because usually
everyone will learn.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You can see, like, when you have meetings with higher managers in the meeting, I advise to watch them when other people are talking, and you're obviously, if you're not the one talking, observe. As soon as somebody starts to talk at the wrong technical level, they immediately lose focus. You will see their eyes. They're going to start looking at their emails or answering something on Slack or God knows what, but you will immediately lose the interest because they just don't understand. And if you're writing in a manner that the audience can't follow, you will not get your message through.
It also goes the other way, because, like, yes, we work at tech companies, but such a massive part of the tech company is the business and the sales and the customer relations and marketing and stuff like this. And if a marketing person starts talking about their magic stuff, you see the engineers go, whoa.
Yeah,
so you watch them do it both ways.
Yeah. That's 100% like that. It's the same, but then you would call it something else. But we're talking about the technical communication part, and obviously our world is very, very complex with a lot of acronyms and concepts and terms,
and it's such a massive field. It's hard to communicate that to, like, my wife, for example. She goes, "Oh, I work in IT," and IT is huge.
Yeah. So what I do, for instance, when somebody says, "Look, my Windows is doing this and that, and, like, can you fix it?" I'm saying, "Sorry, I have no idea how to fix that." Imagine, like, I'm an architect designing a house and you're asking me how to lay bricks. I don't know. It's not, obviously it's a polite way of, like, pushing that back. But the reality is I don't have the IT operations knowledge to fix the Windows. I haven't used Windows for 20 something years and I'm happy. So it's the same way you can actually explain it with analogies or something like that. But analogies usually break down very quickly. So it's a double-edged sword.
I think you raised the point that we have missed so far, and something we bring up always in every episode: integrity and being honest.
Yes.
Never lie. It doesn't matter who you're talking to. Like, if you try and bullshit your way to an engineer, they'll see straight through it. If you bullshit to a senior manager or something, they'll take your word for it, and then when you don't deliver, they'll get really mad at you. Like, lying never works. And being honest and humble about what you know, what you don't know, the state of things, will always get a much better response, and people will respect you a lot more.
I agree. I have no issues with somebody saying, I do not know. If they follow it with, but I can find out. But because that gives you honesty, but also collaboration. Because if you just say, I don't know the whole day, that obviously not very great. Or you could ask back, like if you don't know, and sometimes this is the case. I do not know, but I know who could answer this. So let me get back to you, or let me connect you with that person.
Exactly.
Or let me figure it out myself, because I want to learn about this. This is very common in the technical world when I start asking business-related questions. How many customers do we have? Well, I don't know, but you're the customer management team. Like how many customers do you think we have? Is it 1,000? Is it 1 million? This type of questions can give you also a perspective of what the business partners of yours will ask. And if you can answer these, the confidence in you will go up significantly, because that means you know what the business context is. But if you can't answer, and you're the customer management team and you can't answer how many customers you have, something's wrong there, right? From a business perspective. And you might be the best engineer there is, but it's hard to reason that you design the right system if you don't know how many customers you have to store, for instance. So we have to be careful. And that's why the technical communication is not just about technical terms. It's also about how do we use, or what do we need to do to achieve the business goals at a high level.
Now we've gone up a level, right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
you can like say you're mid-level. I would not expect a junior person to know business terms or anything like that. I expect them to learn the technical stuff and be able to communicate in a technical way that makes them understood. And I, to some extent, not really expect a middle guy to do that, middle girl or guy or whatever person. I would, but if you want to jumpstart your journey, because as soon as you get to senior, you're going to have to do this. So you're going to have to start thinking about these business cases, how this relates to the unit economics, how many customers we have, or how do we scale in what countries, and who makes more money, so you can make scaling decisions, and are they worth serving them, low latency, all this rubbish.
Yes.
Well, rubbish is very important stuff. But maybe at a middle level, then you start learning what the company actually does. And I know I've been guilty of this a lot. But then for me, what I've been guilty of a lot is ignoring the end product. But for me, it's slightly different because my customers are almost always developers within the engineering organization. They're not the end customer of the company. So it's slightly different for me. So I care more about the engineers and how they use the tooling. So they're my customers. But if, say, you're a developer who's developing software that facilitates other teams that then have an end user presence, right? It still should make sense that you understand the eventual end user. I should do this more as well, where it's something I'm bad at and I should do more. What my point was, when you get to mid-level, you're comfortable communicating technically within your team. You should start practicing communicating with non-technical people within the company, technical terms, and try and get them to understand it, because that will kickstart you up a bit earlier.
One very good exercise, I should say, or a technique that I've seen is all newcomers to the company had the chance to spend a few days with customer support. They were picking up calls and understand what the customer thinks about the product and what problems they are facing. Because whoever hears this, from the end user, will have a different view on their own systems that they are operating. And then they start thinking with someone else's head. And then they can also learn how to communicate, because you can't tell to the customer, oh, the service XYZ didn't scale properly because the autoscaler didn't work or had the limitation of the, what are you talking about? You can't say anything like that. You say oh, our best engineers are working on it. We're going to figure out your problem.
When I first started in IT, I was tech support in a data center, and I was in a training call with my manager. He was listening. We had to answer the phones, and I asked a customer if he'd Googled the problem, and he instantly, boop, sorry about that. He's training, so he's new. We'll sort the problem out for you, no problem at all. I learned very quickly then you can't say, have you Googled it, to the end user.
Yes.
Something that I think will teach you a lot of honesty, and well, it has to, in order to work well, teach you a lot of honesty and integrity and humbleness, is participating or even running root cause analysis for a company. I've done hundreds and hundreds, and the only way they ever work well is if everyone in the team can admit that they did something wrong, but there's no blame. That's blameless culture that needs to happen there as well. I remember running one. I was trying to teach an American company how to do RCAs. I will use RCA because I don't want to say analyzes all the time. So I was teaching a company how to do an RCA. And I was like, right, so let's run through this scenario. X system has gone down because of Y. Someone released some code that broke service Y, and then it broke, and then service A or Z broke, and blah, blah, blah. There was cascading failure. How would you communicate that? And they were like, yeah, it was Jim's fault because Jim pushed it, and we need to talk to Jim and make sure he doesn't do that again. And I was like, oh, God, no, that's not how you do it. There was an issue with this system. There was a problem that code that caused an issue in production could pass through the tests. This is how we propose to fix it in future. And this is how we will make sure we pick it up before it even reaches production. And if it does reach production, this is how we'll know as soon as possible to be able to rectify it as quickly as possible. You know, like...
Yeah. So removing the persons from the equation, right? Like, so
yeah.
We're the ones making the mistakes, and we're the ones also reaping the benefits of every success you communicate. We did it. If I write something alone, I still say we did it.
I read something a long time ago that said if you're in interviews and you say we instead of I, it makes you seem a lot humbler. I've always done it. I've always said we as a team did this. I try and share the glory. I try really hard to not say I.
And this is part of the technical communication as well. Every document you write should be in this fashion, and it comes across much nicer. And as you said, like regarding the RCAs, the way you formulate the problem should always be neutral, because you're stating the problems. You're not blaming anyone, and that also nurtures a culture where people are willing to speak up and say what they think the problem is, instead of blaming like Jim did this.
Yep, Jim.
You can say like the operator on call performed the following actions. So you can formulate it in a way that it's not putting the blame on any single person immediately.
So I would try and extend that to every part of working within a company. I will never blame anyone. What I will blame is the processes. And I saw a really good one. It was many years ago when AWS S3 went down. And it was because someone ran a fabric or something that broke the servers. And instead of saying this person shouldn't have done that, they were like, our fabric script was wrong. And we've changed it and we've made it so that it won't happen again. That's exactly the right way to do it. Because it shouldn't be possible for these people to make the problem. I think,
but this is also a learned like skill to be able to write in this manner. But now again, like, there's amazing tooling now where you can write it however however it comes out from from your mind, and then ask, let's say, Gemini or whatever AI tool you're using to rephrase this to be more neutral.
Okay, let's talk about something slightly different. Over communication. Because we had a quick break and you were mentioning to me architecture diagrams, right? And I've seen some really good, clear, simple architecture diagrams. I've seen some mental, complicated ones that just confuse everyone. And this happens a lot. Another thing I was thinking as well, as an example of over communication maybe, is dealing with some juniors who don't understand that they don't need to say all of these technical terms bundled together to sound intelligent. And actually, it makes the opposite. It makes them sound unintelligent if they just try and ram as much information into it. It's not clear. It's too information dense, and it's not good. So there is this, and it is a problem within the tech industry of very clever people mind blasting.
Yeah, it's not being able to communicate clearly enough. They're super knowledgeable experts at their fields, and yet the output that they produce is completely incomprehensible by anyone.
That's what I was trying to get at, in a very bad way.
You just demonstrated.
Yeah, I just demonstrated, exactly.
A very good example is architecture diagrams, right? Like, you can go absolutely overboard with those. And this is one form of technical communication. I would argue the most important part.
Yes, you love your
because
diagrams.
Because it helps others give the overall context and the overall picture of what's happening in a system. And there are techniques to do this exactly in a way that we were discussing. Different levels would have different details. So it's called functional decomposition. First, if you go the whole company as a diagram. You could say, oh, we have order management, we have billing, we have, I don't know, internal back office tooling or whatnot. And these are 3 boxes and you just connect them. This does this, send the data here. And that's it. For a top level manager, this is enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can zoom into each box and like draw smaller boxes to understand what the concepts are. But you would still work high level concepts, not exact services. Let's say order management system that could consist of, I don't know, 5 microservices and 3 databases, but you could just draw it as one box. So always trying to draw everything at the right level is super important for the discussion. Because if you have irrelevant details on it, it will be confusing because the audience feels like, what's that line between the order naming and the order send out service? And like, oh, it doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. Then don't draw it, right? If it doesn't matter, don't draw it. And that's why we keep constantly redrawing new diagrams for different contexts. One pet peeve of mine is when the architecture diagrams are not using domain concepts, but they're using technologies. Again, like it's the same as like putting the technology name in the service.
The icon of the technology there. You know
yeah.
What I mean? Like, I just in my head, I see like Redis and I see Next.js and stuff.
I don't mind if you have icons on there just to designate what technology it is, but I see so many diagrams where typically in interviews or when we're talking amongst engineers, we draw the services and then there's one box that's called Kafka and everything talks to Kafka. And it looks like Kafka is the center of the universe because everybody sends messages and like, that's a typical example of using the wrong abstraction level.
Mm-hmm.
The equivalent would be to draw the operating system as a box, right? Like
network,
you don't do that.
The network. You don't do like
what
the
is in
TCP/IP stack and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So draw the topics that are in Kafka because the topics will be different. And then you can see instead of having a star
like
diagram,
message bus, and then you have the topics.
In service-oriented architectures, that's how most things were actually drawn. And it's just wrong. Write the topics that are used between 2 services to communicate. And then suddenly you don't have a star diagram. Kafka looks like it's a central piece. It's completely irrelevant. So this is an example of how to communicate clearly. Because what would be your first question? Like if you have 15 lines going into Kafka, are they go to the same topic?
Well, it'd be like, is that a single point of failure? That would be my point.
Yeah, that's also, but that's just, but because you're thinking about it from an infrastructure point of view, but from a logical, like data flows perspective, it's irrelevant that it could be that it's the same Kafka cluster. Right? I don't know, maybe I'm spending too much time on this, talking about this, but this is something that I see repeating all over again.
You know those fraction, the infinitely expanding, or what they're called, diagrams. You zoom in and then it goes out. You zoom in and it goes
out.
Fractals, that's it. You could have, that's kind of the same with architecture diagrams. It could just be fractally. The more you zoom in, the more it expands and it's more and more and more. Eventually you'll get to individual electrons going down the cables. But we
shouldn't have that.
No. But we were talking about information dumps and how to avoid those. Because so you were right. We should have multiple architecture diagrams, each for different levels. And within certain domains, how the domains join together, how the services live within a domain, how the service communicates with other services, like that kind of stuff.
I draw different diagrams for product owners or technical people or engineers join. I draw a completely different one because they might be interested in the deployment diagram, right? One is a logical, like I most often work with logical architecture diagrams. So this service is here, but it's actually like 15 instances of that service. And there's a database and like 3 read replicas. It's irrelevant for the discussion, then I'm not showing it. But if you're talking about, let's say, deployment diagram, then I have to show which regions are these deploys, how many instances, how is the replication being done. Yeah. It's a completely different. And you have to be able to switch between these, because if you start with a very, very complicated diagram and you want to express some concern to the managers that this is hard to maintain, it's not going to work. So you have to always adjust it to the right level.
And I think this is a good analogy for technical communication as a whole. Like always tailor the communication to the audience.
There's another example where this is manifesting in writing technical documentation for executive, for instance.
That's what I was thinking.
Technical documentation is more like a summary of something that they need to know about on the tech side.
Yep.
A very good technique is, instead of detailing everything, how it is, how we made the decision, yada, yada, and then ending with a summary conclusion, instead do the inverse. In the beginning, write, this is our conclusion.
Yep.
Because that's pretty much the executive summary part. We recommend using this technology instead of this because of the cost. We recommend deprecating this older technology in favor of the new one, and we estimate it to be 6 months of work and this amount of euros to do it. And then you have a reasoning section after it with all the technical bloody details, right? And there you can go into it. So if somebody's interested in it, they can dive into the details of how you came to these conclusions. That might be very important as well. But if you start with a high-level abstraction, and this is, as you said, like this could be analogous to doing the high-level architecture diagram first with 3 boxes. This is how it is. This is what the high-level, the bird's eye view of the problem is, including our conclusions and recommendations. And then you go into the more technical details. And then if you need even more technical details, let's say the backing data, because you can just write in this document, let's say that we have 1.3 million customers and 43% are small businesses. You don't have to write the SQL query there, but you should link another document that has the details of all the customers and the breakdown and the charts and whatnot. So you can have multiple layers of details, and I would start with the high level first, then the more detailed explanation. And if even more details are needed, references to the source data.
It's kind of the opposite to how a junior would think.
And the benefit of this is it caters for much wider audiences. Because think about it, a junior can read the executive summary, right? And they can understand it because it's in simple terms, very clear messaging. But then they might wonder, like, why the hell did we make this decision? And then they can go into it. And an executive can read the first section and they say, like, okay, good enough for me.
It's very clever, actually, now I think about it, because you go wide to narrow. Wide audience, and then you keep getting narrower now by being more and more technical.
Which means that the document will be easier to digest for everyone. And also, you're not losing the audience because you builds on the curiosity as well. Like if you read the decision, like, oh, I wonder why that is. And then you can explore the details if you want. But imagine the reverse. I write 15 pages of deep technical analysis. Who will read that? Like, not the executive.
Well, the 1%, right? It'll be the 1% who would have gone
exactly. So that's a very concrete advice I can give. Start with the high-level overview first, go into more technical details later. And this is true for design as well. When you're designing a system, that's a whole other topic.
But it's also, it can work with communication, like verbal communication in meetings as well, because you can start up the top and then you tailor it to you can guess who the technical level of people, and then you can tailor it to that, and then you go down as they need. The good thing about this is you make sure that everyone understands without people zoning out, and they slowly filter out as you carry on, but they understand to the extent of their ability, and then other people can dig deeper. That's a very good way of thinking.
And you're not wasting anyone's time because they can drop off at the technical level that they're comfortable with. And this is true with the RCA as well. If you think about it, RCA, we always say, what happened? Oh, we had an outage for 5 minutes between this and this times. Why? And then you go into a bit more detail. Oh, because the order management system was down. Why? Oh, because the whatever microservice had CPU 100%. And you go, and then the first sentence was enough for managers probably, but for fixing the issue and for the teams, you have to go deeper and deeper. So I think this is a general pattern that is repeating all over the place in design, in verbal communication, written communication, even with the customers. The customers don't need to know necessarily all the details. Like let's say you're trying to sell a product. What does it do? If I say, this is a content distribution network that I'm trying to sell you, okay, that's a good first sentence, right? Like, okay, I need one.
This is how much it costs. And these are the features.
Yeah, and then you go into the details. Which regions is it available? Can it do caching? Or like, what sort of caching can it do? You can go into the details, but you're not starting with like, we have this, this technology, that technology on these 15 continents. It's irrelevant. Like what is it first?
That's a really, I like that. It's a very good takeaway, actually. Start wide, get more narrow as you carry on. And that's all we have time for today. Please remember to reach out to us on techleaguepodcast@gmail.com if you have any comments or anything. You can find us on Spotify at Tech League. You can find us on YouTube at Tech League Podcast, on Apple Podcasts at Tech League, and whatever your favorite podcast thing is. If you're not there, please get in touch with us and we'll make sure we're listed. Thank you, as always, Krisztian, for being here.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next week. Puss, puss.
Puss, puss.
Thank you for listening to the Tech League podcast.